Welcome to r/malicious compliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. And today we have 3 great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story. Lady HOA has to follow the rules, because she made me follow the rules. The second story. Manager didn't listen to me and was demoted after that. The third story. HOA didn't want to fix our faucet, so they got a stink bomb. On to the first story. HOA lady has to follow rules eventually. I bought my first house in 1999, and I wanted DirecTV. I put up a satellite dish, which happened to be behind a privacy fence. I also knew the FCC ruling that HOAs couldn't prevent you from putting up a dish due to some malfeasance with home builders who would make shady deals with cable companies to force homeowners to go with a specific company. I think that's right. I figured I wouldn't have any issues since it was behind a fence anyway. I got a knock at my door the next day, and it was my neighbor from across the cul-de-sac telling me she's on the board of the HOA. Your dish is in violation and must be removed. This was my first encounter with her. I politely explained the law as I knew it and told her to have a nice day. We didn't speak again, and she ended up moving out soon. Well, it turns out she didn't move out and was just renting to some other lady I never spoke to, and the HOA lady moved back in a year later. There was an easement behind my house, which was properly mowed when I moved in. I would hit golf balls down there with my wedge, and my neighbor was into archery and used it as his range. By the second summer I lived there, it was overgrown and an eyesore. I couldn't even see the creek just behind my house anymore. One weekend I borrowed my dad's utility trailer, and I spent 3 days clearing out our little section behind the houses, hauling all the debris away, probably 2 trips a day. My arms were covered in cuts from briars, and apparently I was also dealing with sumac, poison ivy, or some other stuff, because by Monday I was having an allergic reaction so badly that I went to the doc to get a steroid shot. Laid up in the hospital all day and I get a knock at the door. It's the neighbor woman again. Apparently there's a rule that you cannot store a trailer in the driveway for more than 3 days, and this was day 4. I needed to remove it by the end of the day or face a $500 fine. She handed me a paper listing the rule, and I considered just paying the fine, but instead I angrily drove an hour each way to return to my dad's trailer, after spending half the day already waiting in a hospital lobby. I got home after dark. What struck me as odd was there was a list of things you couldn't store in your driveway. Personal watercraft, boats, trailers, etc. The odd part was that motorcycle was listed on there. I don't ride one myself, but I thought it was a totally reasonable thing to keep in a driveway. After I finished all this work, this woman would routinely walk through my yard without asking, but since she was taking her grandkid to play in the creek, I never said anything. Even though it bothered me, she never asked. A year or so later, I wanted to sell the house and move into something bigger. I had talked to a realtor already, and I was getting things tidied up to have the house shown. As I was cleaning out a drawer, I noticed that paper the HOA lady had given me, and I remembered the part about motorcycles being listed. You see, the HOA lady had started dating an older gentleman, and he had moved in with her. Turns out he rode a Harley which was always parked in her driveway. She was home, so I walked over there and politely informed her about the violation. The next day, the motorcycle was parked on her back porch, the one she bragged about to everyone who would listen, so she could tell them how much it cost. I laughed to myself, but then I remembered the part about it needing to be behind a fence. Another knock at the door, and within a few days, a fence company was building a 6-foot privacy fence, which completely hid her fancy new deck. My realtor had been on my case for at least a week about needing to put up a for sale sign, so as soon as the fence was finished, I told her it was okay. I sold the house quickly and moved out at the end of the month. Oh, and by the way, the fence was completely hideous and looked out of place because of the way her lot was shaped. I don't like neighbors like that. Why can't we not be Karen and live in peace? If you want to buy a house and you know that annoying neighbors live next to you, you better buy a house somewhere else. They won't let you live in peace. Apparently this woman was bored and wanted to make trouble for you, but I'm glad you got your revenge by making trouble for her. I sure as hell never let my neighbor tell me what I can and can't do on my property. There are city bylaws for that, and if you're not the mayor of my city, then kick rocks. I had a neighbor who didn't like my fence. He kept telling me so. He said the fence should have been painted blue and my fence was green. I had to repaint it according to the HOA rules. I had a friend who was an HOA member and I asked him about the rules. He said there was never such a rule, and everyone around here knows that this neighbor is crazy. When the neighbor came again, I told him I would repaint the fence, but I never did. I never saw him in my yard again. The HOA representatives never had a complaint against me. The next story is, do as you're told. I have more experience. I work as an engineer for a food manufacturing company in the UK. If you eat meat bought from any supermarket, chances are it comes through here. Now the good thing is our internal quality assurance and inspections really are second to none. Anything even slightly out of spec is removed, and the cause is addressed by a myriad of people, including me, which naturally takes time. This includes machines not working as expected. So I came into work one morning and see 7 or 8 people stood around one of our metal detectors. It's a simple machine that allows meat to flow through until metal is detected. At this point, a valve turns and dumps the meat into a reject bin before returning to its normal position. The valve can be placed upside down, in which it will just constantly dump the meat. I approach the gaggle of people to see what's going on. It's an argument, just what we all need at 5:30. Hygiene staff, the valve goes this way. The engineers have told us it. Operators, no it doesn't. The manager says it goes the opposite way. And other sentiments to that nature are being thrown around by all. I intervene and confirm that the HS are correct. It fits in that way, and even go on to show them how and why that's the case. The manager M then turned up, seeing his minions stood about and asked what was going on. I quickly briefed him on the situation, but before I could explain why he stopped me and asked his operators. After hearing them out, he demanded I put the valve in as his operators have said, because they and he have more experience than me and know what they're doing. This is despite me correcting this exact issue multiple times in the year I've been on site. I protest and warn him this will cause downtime on the line when the valve has to be swapped around, paperwork filled out, and someone to confirm the meat is okay to go back through. At least 30 minutes, but that's 4 operators and anywhere between 0.5 to 1 tons of meat sat doing nothing. And that's if I don't get called to another job in the meantime. I was assured this is what was happening. I did as asked. I then emailed him and BCC'd M's manager to CMA. 15 minutes later, when the line was trying to run, I got a call over the tannoy to CM. M, the metal detector is broken. I need it looking at. Self, the valve is the wrong way like I said. You now need to do X, Y, and Z and change the valve to how it should be. M, I need you to do it. That's what you're here for. Self, I'm here to respond to breakdowns and carry out maintenance. This is neither. At this point, I received another call over the tannoy for an actual breakdown. He and his experience were left to correct it, and it took twice as long than if I had done it myself. M gets questioned by his boss later about the downtime and why it happened. He tried to throw me under the bus and say I installed it wrong. M gets chewed out for lying about it because the email wasn't seen by only him, and I hear everything from my workshop next door. He was demoted after that. I've never had him question my decisions since, and I back everything up with an email and BCC to someone else relevant. Sometimes I question if I'm being a little over the top, but then I remember there are some truly devious people out there. Sometimes you have to listen to your colleagues. Even if they are lower in rank than you, they may know a lot more because of their experience. This manager was not competent, so he deserved to be demoted. Now he'll know not to put on a crown and think you're better than everyone else. When I worked at the bar, my manager didn't manage his staff well. He always thought the employees were his slaves and he could do whatever he wanted with them. One time, a drunk customer came in. I noticed that he was harassing other customers and told the manager that he should be kicked out. The manager didn't listen to me, and the drunk customer started a fight. He broke the refrigerator with the drinks and ran away. The refrigerator was paid for by the manager, but if he had listened to me, his salary would not have covered the cost of the refrigerator. The last story is, fine, I'll water the flowers. So where I'm from, an HOA isn't really a thing. For the fortunate ones among us, however, who live in an apartment building get something similar. A council of sorts who vote on what we can all split the budget on for maintenance, and that makes decisions about what can and cannot be done on the outside of the building. Naturally, what should be an objective and reasonable discussion is known to turn rather petty. Everyone wants to fix their thing first after all, and to hell with the rest. There's been more than one instance of, you want to place an AC unit outside? Well, first we'll have to do X. Naturally, the person making that demand would later place their own AC outside, and it's been approved by everyone. So I'm not going to point any fingers to who's guilty here. I'm just going to recount the story. So my mother, like everyone else in the meeting, had gathered a whole list of bullet points of things that needed to be done, in the hopes of getting only a couple done really. There were points she didn't really care that much about, but if there were another thing she was willing to forget about in order to have something done she did want, then that was all that mattered. One of those things was our outside tap. Now, we're not the only ones with an outside tap, but we're the only ones with a small path to the front of the building. Remember that, it's important. However, something with these taps, they're separate from the inside taps, is broken. We believe it may be a filter or something, or maybe the pipes are just bust, but one thing is clear, the water reeks. It's like someone has pulled stagnant water out of the swamp, right next to an exhaust pipe above a McDonald's. Supposedly it's fine, but it doesn't smell like it's fine. So of course when we need water outside, we usually just use the tap water inside. Now for the malicious compliance. So the meeting starts and everyone of course starts listing off their own respective issues, and she ends up in an argument with another resident over a couple issues. Eventually the resident comes up with the fact that with the heat wave, the little garden in front of our residence is completely wilted, and that with us being the only one with easy driveway access, it should be our responsibility to keep them watered. Of course, my mom was a little bit peeved, since none of her demands were being listened to, and now they had the audacity to make demands of her. However, the gears of malicious compliance were already ticking. She asked that if she did it, if something else could be arranged. Apparently not thinking anything of the sudden friendly smile, an agreement was made, and the meeting concluded as all meetings do, still disgruntled and no one happy. Except her, of course. The next day with a smile, she pulls out the garden hose and plugs it in the outside tap, strides all the way up to the front of the building and then let loose. From a distance, everything probably seemed fine. If you got closer though, you'd believe that the building might actually be retrofitted to serve as the local toxic waste recycling area, as the hose was directly linked to Satan's garden faucet. The water forming a thick smelly barrier that I heard later on drafted upwards, straight to the other residents' buildings just as well. This only seemed helped by the summer heat, causing it all to evaporate rather than to sink away in the soil, lasting almost all day, which turned into a 24/7 haze, as she wanted to make sure the flowers would survive the heat, of course. The next meeting, she was politely requested to stop watering the flowers, and now they're considering finally fixing those taps. Edit. Things are bordering on getting the law involved just as well here. There have been a couple of instances where they did, and I'd be surprised our apartment block houses like 40 people total. Still, I could always get an inspector, or I wonder what my lawyer would think, is often a strong enough argument for people to start making concessions in those discussions. Your mother complied with their demands and obeyed. They wanted her to water the flowers. She did that, but I think they should have paid attention to your mom's demands sooner. Then they wouldn't have gotten the stink bomb, haha. They can't tell you to stop watering them, but they sure don't like the smell of water, so they'll have to fix the faucet. Keep watering the plants. Asking you to stop is an admission that there is a water problem that needs fixed. Some people in the HOA have too much free time and like to militantly inconvenience others because it's technically against the rules. I get it. The difference is that outside of the US, any such association doesn't really have any power other than what its members give it. They can't ruin your life any more than the usual annoying neighbors, who are bored with living without tantrums. Our HOA solves tenants' problems. I had a problem with the road. There was a bad road near my house and I approached the HOA. At first they didn't want to do it, and explained that they had better things to do. But after 3 days, workers came and did the road. Thanks for watching. Hit the like button and subscribe.